absolutely insane.
It's ridiculous. All right, are we on? We are on.
We're on.
So we have that beautiful music there. Supervisor Sumedian, you can stop serenading us now. Are we on hold with Supervisor Sumedian? Is that what that is?
Yes, well, we're waiting for him to call in.
He did call in already, I'm hearing?
He has not.
Has not. Do we have a quorum without him for the implementation board?
Please enter
Or
your
implementation,
PIN
yes.
followed by the pound or hash. If you do not know your PIN, please enter pound or hash.
You're getting us connected. Okay, we're going to change things up a little bit, and the chair of the implementation board has agreed. We're going to start with the implementation board action first, which is item 8. We'll start there. Then we'll come back and do the joint.
Followed by the pound or
And then those
hash.
members of the implementation board
If you
that
do
aren't
not
on
know
governing
your
board
PIN,
can
please enter
leave.
Pound or hash.
And hopefully by then we'll have our member from San Jose and we'll have a quorum for the governing board. Oh, we're going to have trouble with the implementation. We're going to have trouble with the joint. With the joint, it will be. Not having a quorum for the governing. Okay, so let's take 30 seconds here and we'll do these items.
Implementation.
Implementation board. Chair
All right,
Rosati.
thank you, Chair Wasserman.
Oh, you know what? I bet she's going to say we'd like a roll call. A roll call for the implementation board.
Yes. Chair Lazat. Here. Board members Tucker.
Here.
Tovar. Wasserman.
Here.
Rocha. Here. Kalman. Here. Esparza. Raval. Councilmember Spring is acting for member Constantine Spring.
Here.
Carmen.
Present.
Lazat. Oh,
Here.
sorry. Keegan.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to, as Chair Wasserman said, we're now on item, the consent agenda for the implementation board. It's a records retention schedule. I just need a motion on the consent calendar.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Motion moved and seconded. Angie, did you get those?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the records retention schedule. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstention? That motion carries unanimously. Regular business, item 9, resolution authorizing the acquisition of a portion of the United Technologies Corporation property, Eastern Parcel, also known as UTC 2. Recommended action is to adopt a resolution approving the purchase of a portion, 1,526 acres of United Technology Corporation holdings in accordance with Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan for the appraised fair market value of $4,330,000.
City of San Jose.
The parties anticipate the close of escrow to occur on or before January 31st, 2020. Close of escrow is contingent upon receipt of a clean final Phase 1, which I believe we have.
Yes.
And so it'll just be contingent upon the release of the property from an existing administrative order concerning environmental remediation. Do we have a staff report?
Yes. And I'm going to give a short presentation. We also have John Epperson, who is an attorney specializing in this aspect of the law, contaminated properties and RCRA and all those various regulations. And we also have Charlie Olmstad, who works for Northgate Environmental, who is the person who led the team who did the Phase 1 environmental assessment. If any of you have questions pertaining to the legality and some of the complications of acquiring a property like this. So, quick acquisition overview. So the seller is the United Technology Corporation. The price, as Chairperson Lazat said, is $4,330,000. That's what the appraised value was. The number of acres is 1,526. Anticipated close of escrow is March 2020. So in a regional context, you can see where the property is and how it relates to other properties that are either parks or open space areas or properties that have existing conservation easements on them. It's adjacent to the Coyote Ridge property that we have our easement over and is owned by the Open Space Authority. This is a map showing the weird boundary of this parcel, which is to reflect sort of the unique aspects of this particular acquisition. So the lands that UTC is retaining are the ones where they're doing the active cleanup, mainly groundwater with chloride. And there also is where most of the soil remediation activity happened. There was over 200 buildings on the site, and I believe all of them, except possibly one, was in the areas that they are retaining. So we had initially discussed buying the whole property from UTC, but the Department of Toxic Substances and the Regional Water Quality Board were not comfortable with them transferring title to us for the whole property. So we went out and with them worked with UTC to create one large parcel, which is the one that you see on the map here. And to the best of our knowledge, it is not contaminated. The property appraisal, so due diligent findings, the property appraisal preliminary title report was received and reviewed by the Habitat Agency. The title report reflects there are no superior liens or interests that would substantially conflict with the property's conservation values. Easements, covenants, restrictions, reserve rights, and other property interests set forth in the preliminary title report were reviewed and determined not to be in conflict with enrollment of the site in the reserve system. Phase 1 environmental assessment has determined that no additional investigation of the property appears warranted at this time. Close of escrow is contingent upon release of the property from an existing administrative order concerning environmental remediation. And from reading over the report, there was a small station on the properties that we're proposing to purchase. It was cleaned up, and it was supposed to be released from the order that was over the entire site, but for some paperwork reason was not done. And when that is complete, then we'll feel comfortable closing on this property with United Technology Corporation. And like I said, we have two experts here if you have any questions related to that or anything else with this acquisition. Deal financing. This is the really exciting part where we are, except for all the due diligence work, which will not exceed $200,000, we're getting funding from a lot of our conservation partners to buy this. Gore and Betty Moore Foundation just recently gave us a $600,000 grant for this property. We're going to use a little over 1.7 million of our 2016 Section 6 grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, State of California, Wildlife Conservation Board, 1.5 million, which is usually a match to the Section 6 grant. That's how they disperse their funds. And then we have Matt Freeman here from the Open Space Authority, and they're generously offering $500,000 towards this acquisition. Ultimately, the property will be deeded over to them with our conservation easement over it. So environmental assets of the property. Property supports 9 natural land cover types, provides habitat for 14 of our covered species. It has critical habitat for the red-legged frog, the tiger salamander, and the bay checker-spot butterfly. Additional special status species benefiting from this acquisition are Thule elk, American badger, pallid bat, white-tailed kite, and golden eagle. It's also an important acquisition for wildlife movement, which is a lot of people are talking about now how creating reserve systems is not good enough. It's making sure that they're connected with each other to ensure the long-term survivability of a lot of these species. And this property connects roughly 132,000 acres of protected open space from Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve to Henry Coe Park to Joseph Grant Ranch County Park. These are some of the species that are on the property or adjacent to. These are some of the ones that are currently on the property, using it either to pass through or to breed. This is a picture that was taken on a recent trip we had of the property. You wouldn't even know you're on the edge of Silicon Valley when you're back there. This is one of the riparian corridors. Being a great rain year, there's still water in the creek. And the action requested today from the implementation board is to adopt a resolution authorizing the executive officer to purchase subject property. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions or comments for any of the staff? I just want to congratulate you, number one, on the staying with UTC and getting this property purchased, but also purchased without a dime from us. I think that's really great that you were able to get all of those grants. It's fantastic. I appreciate the individuals, the men who are here for the environmental assessment. It's great to know that we have basically a clean bill of health on this property. The one thing I'm always concerned about when we buy property that have potential is that we wind up being stuck holding the bag. So maybe it's a good thing that the environmental agency wasn't real thrilled with us purchasing the entire UTC property. At some point, it might be cleaned up and it'll be available for us or someone else. But anyway, do we have a motion to authorize the executive director to approve the purchase of the UTC property? Have a motion and a second. Angie, did you get those?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion carries unanimously and gratefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Good
And
job.
through the chair to
Yes.
Angie. Is Supervisor submitting, did he vote?
No, he's not part of the implementation board.
Implementation, he's governing only?
He's governing.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
So I heard somebody come on while I was...
Yes, from San Jose, Pam Foley.
Councilmember Foley is on the line listening in, but
She's on
cannot
governing.
vote on items.
She's on governing. Does that make the quorum?
She's on both,
Oh.
but she cannot vote on items because the teleconference was not published on the agenda ahead of time. So she's just listening in.
She's just listening in. Okay. Okay. So we don't have a quorum?
I'm just here to listen.
Hi, Pam.
Hi.
Madam Chair, you have one other item?
Sorry.
Then we'll adjourn yours and we'll go to joint.
Thank you. I
Yep.
was having so much... Okay.
Oh, somebody just came on the line. Thank you.
Yep.
So the other item on ours is future implementation agenda items. Anyone want to put something on our agenda? If not, then I'm going to adjourn the implementation board, and we'll go to the joint board.
Super. And Valerie, if you'll just, Angie, we don't have a quorum right now for governing,
For
correct?
governing, correct.
So Valerie, at the county, for instance, receiving reports does not take a motion?
Correct. You can deal with items
Okay.
2, 3, and 4 because you don't have to take an action on those.
Okay, 3 and 4 were received, 2 was review, so you're okay with that use, that word as well?
Yes, because the
No action.
joint board is not acting, it's just reviewing. That's actually on for the governing board to act on.
Gotcha. Okay, so fellow board members, implementation and governing, we're going to do items 2, 3, and 4 at this time. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak about speak to any of these items? Anyone from the public who wishes to speak about anything not on the agenda? Seeing none for either, we'll proceed to item number 2. And again, these are not actionable items, so no vote or no roll call is necessary on these items. We'll start with number 2. And item 2, Edmund. No problem.
So item 2 is just to go over our end-of-year budget from
Yes.
last fiscal year. So as stated in the report, revenues were $13,130,504. Projected revenues were slightly more than that, at $13,677,588. And those were both from grants and fee revenues that projects pay. So turning to the next page, your page 16. the total fees that were, we had projected fee revenue to be around $5 million. We were a little short of that this year. Fee revenue was $4,305,833. Grant revenues were a little bit higher than what was projected. We projected almost 8.7, and we got a little bit over 8.8. And I'd like to thank Valley Water for the $8 million grant through their D7 program.
That came out of my pocketbook.
Yeah.
I wrote the check.
And that 6.5 of that goes towards the acquisition for the Baird property, which is an important mitigation property. We're going to close escrow on that property, by the way, by the middle of October. So.
Wonderful.
Expenses, we came in a little under what we projected, which is always a good thing. We had projected nearly 4.7, and we came in at just a little bit over 4.1 million.
Question.
Yes.
Are those expenses just deferred, or did we just frugal?
No deferred this year. It just, certain things that we thought would happen didn't happen, or they came in a little bit less than we anticipated.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There are some deferred revenues, we think, particularly from Morgan Hill and Gilroy. There are a couple big projects that we thought were going to come in last year, didn't, projected to come in this year. So I can answer any questions pertaining to this report, but I just gave you the highlights.
Committee members here or on the phone, any questions for our director? Nope.
This is Supervisors Committee and no questions.
Thank you. Seeing no questions and no members from the public, we will consider item 2 having been reviewed and not requiring a vote of any type. Item number 3, Soralo property acquisition.
So Jerry House is going to give you a presentation on this. A couple of years ago, the governing board gave different delegation authorities for acquisitions, $1 million or less. You delegated the executive officer the right to close on those deals. $5 million or less, $5 million to $1 million, $1 implementation board. Above $5 million goes to the governing board. And this was a property we bought for $450,000. And so I'll let Jerry give you all the good news about this one.
And Jerry, do you say house or Haas?
Haas.
Thank you.
Yep. And thank you, Ed, and thank you everyone for being here. We're happy that you're all here, and nice to be sharing good news. That's a good spot to be in here. Edmund presented a land acquisition that is likely to happen. I'm going to present one that actually has already happened.
And excuse me, this is Supervisors Committee, and I cannot hear. I apologize, but if you could just speak into that microphone, that'd be
I'm just
better.
going to have to bend my knees and squat down
There
a
you
little
go.
bit. I'm a little too tall for this. Maybe I'll attach it to my head. The singers up there or something. So this is the Habitat Agency's first fee title land purchase. We own other properties, but this is the first one we've actually gone out and bought ourselves. So we've gone 5 years without a land purchase, but we currently have several in the works, as you're hearing from Ed, and you'll hear more about them a little bit later. Sort of like watching a football game where there's no score through 2 quarters, and then all of a sudden someone scores and someone else scores, and pretty soon you're racking up points. That's what's going to be happening. Oh, thank you. That helps out. I don't have to squat there. Good, better for my posture. So here's an aerial image of the Soralo property. The 2 yellow properties, the properties that are bordered in yellow, comprise the 55 acres that was our original, I guess you call it a grant or dedication from Caltrans. The parcel that's bordered in red is a Bureau Rec property that splits the 2 parcels that we own. And in that long blue ribbon-shaped piece of property, that's the Soralo property. 123 acres. There's a home site, which you can't really see too well in the image, but it's to the east of that fish-shaped lake. So it's the far eastern end of the parcel where you have a home site with a few outbuildings. So we came to know the Soralos essentially by being neighborly. We acquired this property, property A in this image. We sent out notification letters to all of our neighbors, letting them know who we were, that we bought the property, don't be afraid of us. And then we got to know 3 of them pretty well, our upstream neighbors, the Seralos. The downstream neighbors are the Bordettes, a ranching family out there, and then the neighbor across the street are the Joyces. When the Seralos mentioned they were thinking of leaving the state, we saw an opportunity to work with them to protect the land that they've loved over the couple of decades that they've owned it. So we hired a surveyor, and we carved out a 20-acre remainder parcel. So now the Serralo property is in red, and the remainder parcel that we carved out is shaded in blue or bordered in blue. That left us, so we wanted to carve out the home site because having a home site on property that we purchase is going to inflate the property values, and we don't really want home sites. We don't want homes at all. They do, so we left that for them. So that left us 103 acres with no development, good habitat, and I'll describe that in a minute, and left the Seralos with the 20-acre parcel that has the house and all the outbuildings and their primary access onto the highway. Here's how we split the parcel. As a public agency, we are exempt from the Subdivision Map Act. We can create lots through parcel purchases, which is what we did here. We created legal lot here. We worked with the Seralos to define a boundary that would give us the entirety of that 14-acre pond that you saw in the previous image, because it's rich with wildlife, especially birds. In this image, you can see that the new property line jogs around the east perimeter of the pond. The 103 acres includes several important habitat types for us that we need to protect. We haven't completed a habitat survey for this property yet, but we know that some of these land cover types are there. We just can't give you the quantities. So all these are featured on the site. Most importantly, I think, is the riparian, the pond, and then also the sycamore alluvial woodland. There are only about 370 acres of sycamore alluvial in the planned area, and we have to protect 40 and then create 14. So this was an important pickup for us. Here are a couple of photos that showcase the beauty of the property. It is gorgeous. And there's the creek. This was just after the stormwater flows were starting to come down from this last winter. And I mentioned that the habitat types on the site were important for us, but the property is also important for other reasons. It's a critical linkage point that's already identified in the habitat plan for both aquatic and terrestrial species for wildlife movement. There aren't too many sites that have kind of that cross section of terrestrial and aquatic wildlife movement corridors. So this was a key pickup here. It's adjacent to land we already own, which means that we can expand our reserve system with contiguous parcels that create larger conservation areas. It's more efficient on a per acre basis to manage large land holdings than several smaller land holdings. There's less edge effect for habitat impacts. And along the reach of Pacheco Creek can now be monitored for wildlife movement. The property is already being assessed as a component of our Pacheco Creek restoration project, which will be analyzed in our feasibility study on this reach of Pacheco Creek, and we expect that to be available later this year. Total purchase price was $450,000 for this property, and we can assure you that $4,500 an acre is a good price for quality conservation land. Over time, we'll identify a partner to enable us to enroll this into a conservation easement and get it into our reserve system. But the important thing is it's protected now. We own it. So this final slide is just a preview of that feasibility study I was mentioning to you. You can see how the Serralo acquisition kind of fits nicely into this comprehensive stream and riparian restoration effort. You could say it flows right into it very well. Last bad pun of the day, I promise. So with that, I'll conclude this presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have
Thank you, Jerry. And Angie, for the record, Maya Esparza has arrived.
Yes.
So governing board is now at a votable quorum.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. So implementation of governing board members. This also was a non-action item. Any members, Doug, do you wish to speak on this item? Okay. So no one from the public wishes to speak. Any committee members? Any questions for Jerry?
Yes, please.
Yes, please, Renee.
Pause. The question was...
Thank you. The water district is also planning a reservoir expansion project.
Welcome. This service is provided by freeconferencecall.com. Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign.
So how close is that to this area? And do you expect any impact or not?
We've been working pretty closely with Valley Water. We understand that I'm trying to get this back into, I think I have an image here that will show you approximately how close we are to Pacheco Reservoir. So on this image here, does my cursor show up there for you?
Yes.
Okay, so those are our two properties there. Sorala runs up to about here, where that pond is, and this is Pacheco Reservoir. They're beginning their feasibility study, their preliminary designs for the dam enlargement and the increased size for the reservoir. They'll be on our property off and on for the foreseeable future, doing habitat surveys up and down the stream. They're looking for opportunities, I think, to collaborate with us on some restoration. What's kind of unknown is how this would affect our restoration project. This project was in the works for a little while. The identification of a restoration potential on our property and then acquiring Sorala meant that we just kind of wanted to move forward with this in spite of what happens. So my guess is that if this property is restored, Valley Water is going to be conducting the restoration project with that in mind. They're going to have to manage flows downstream. They're going to be working with us closely on what the flow regime looks like. So we have kind of a sense of what sort of flows they're talking about, 10 cubic feet per second, with some pulse flows for fish, and that would be fine with us. If a bigger reservoir is built, maybe it's a little less fashy. We're just not sure how that's going to play out. So they've got a long road ahead of them, Valley Water, so we'll have to see how long this project takes to unfold. But we're ready to move forward with this because there's enough restoration potential on the property. There's enough need to fix some of the degraded habitat that's out there now. So we plan to move forward.
The chair of the Valley Water.
Yeah, it happens to be sitting here. Next to Anderson Dam, this is one of our high priorities because it's going to give us in-county water supply.
That's why I'm aware of it.
Yeah, and so I think just the conversations you've been having, the conversations we're going to continue to have, one of the reasons that we're so much in favor of this is what it will bring with the larger water body and the flows that are going to come out of there. The benefits to the aquatic habitat is really one of the benefits of doing this particular project. So we see it as an environmental enhancement, in a great magnitude. So I can, almost can't guarantee anything, but the fact that you're ahead of us with the restoration project, I think is probably good, so that it gives us something to keep in mind as we're looking at the flows or whatever we intend to do, because like I said, the environmental enhancement is the biggest selling point for us with this reservoir.
Well, I appreciate your response. There was a reason I brought it up. I know they're close by. It would be a pity to restore something and then lose it again.
All right.
Even if it's just for a couple of years or something.
Yeah. There'll be. They certainly can't release all the water at once. Whatever they do is going to be metered out of there. We don't see this as having a potential of affecting any restoration projects we're going to be conducting out there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Seeing no other questions, no one from the public, we'll consider item number 3 received. We'll move on to item number 4, which is a report from our executive director, Edmund.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Chairman. So just, I want to thank the governing board for doing an emergency meeting in June. I appreciate everybody who participated in that. Got some very important things done, including a purchase and sale agreement signed with the Tilton family for the bared parcels of their ranch. And as I mentioned later in the EL report, we're working with the family to try to acquire the rest of their property. So in January, hopefully we'll be coming before the governing board with a request to purchase the rest of the ranch. So with the endowment investment, I figured it'd be a good idea to update you each meeting on where we stand. To date, we've invested $1,318,000 and change into the Silicon Valley Community Foundation for our endowment. The endowment is, the fees paid, a portion of it goes towards endowment investment for long-term management of the reserve system when the permit sunsets in 50 years. So when we stop permitting projects, we still have to manage that 47,000 acres that we're supposed to acquire forever. And this endowment would give us the financial sustainability to do that. So the balance as of yesterday was $1,413,660. Took a bit of a dip from July. Last time I looked at it, the market's been going like this lately, as we all know with our 401ks. So no surprise, but at least we're still in the black. So I want to give you an advocacy update. Some of this information I would have reported to you in June, but I was on vacation when you had the special meeting. And again, thank you, and especially kudos to Chairman Wasserman for balancing the Library Commission meeting with our meeting. So the stuff with housing is kind of the old stuff, but the stuff with these bonds is recent, what we've been working with the California Habitat Conservation Planning Coalition. So there's several, I think there's 25 or 26 NCCPs in the state, either permitted or in the process of trying to get their permits like we have. There's also a lot of HCPs in the state that aren't tied in with an NCCP. So this coalition is made up of representatives from the Central Valley, the North Coast, the Bay Area, Southern California, and areas east of LA. So we meet periodically. A bunch of us have pooled some monies together to work with a firm, EEC, keeps us up on what's going on, and they have good connections with the state legislators. And there was some recent bills that came up, AB 1298. You can see the title of it, very long, and by Mullins, and SB 45. So we're working with the legislative staff and our lobbyists to ensure that the funding for these bills being proposed, the bond funding, some of it will go towards NCCPs because they talk a lot about endangered species and mitigation and climate, how that's going to affect animals, and there's a realization that what we do, we're kind of in the trenches on the front lines of the changing climate and trying to manage that for wildlife. And both these bonds are looking at least some initial numbers I've seen is around 100 million that would be available for NCCPs, so that's good news for us. On the housing front, we all recognize, I live here like you all do. We have a housing problem here. Some people call it a crisis, certainly of affordability. So the coalition isn't against any of these bills, but some of these bills were proposing wiping out local government's ability to assign, to put impact fees or any sort of user fees on projects that were focused on affordable housing. So we were concerned about how that would affect our ability to raise revenues and meet the obligations of our federal and state permits. On the second page and third page, you'll see some language. There's talking points, and then for SB 330 was amended to remove the provisions which waive fees for affordable housing projects. And I think a lot of local governments were weighing in on this, but this is certainly, we had direct conversations with, I think it was Senator Skinner's staff on this, and I don't think they completely realized the implications of their bill and the impacts it would have on agencies like ours and potentially undermining another state program, the NCCP program. So they worked collaboratively with us to change some of the language in the bill. And again, we recognize the importance of affordable housing, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and undermine another state program. On the grant update, I mentioned the $8 million from Valley Water. OSA submitted a priority conservation area land acquisition grant for $1 million that would go towards the Tilton property if we're fortunate enough to acquire the rest of the ranch. Point Blue, which is the old Point Reyes Bird Observatory, they submitted a grant on our behalf to do some restoration work on the Pajaro River for almost $400,000. OSA, it's their property and they're the co-applicants. We submitted in May a grant, another Section 6 grant through the federal government for $10 million. They raised the cap. Well, they took away the cap. It used to be a cap of only $2 million that you could apply for land acquisition through Section 6. So they eliminated the cap, so we said, well, we're going to go for $10 million. We probably won't get it, but hopefully we'll be hearing soon whether we've been awarded, successfully awarded a grant and for how much. Some of the properties being targeted in that grant are Sargent Ranch, Castro Valley Ranch, Tilton, Coyote Valley. We know there's a big interest in trying to acquire property there. So that's kind of, keep our fingers crossed on that one. We submitted 3 local assistant grants in August for nearly $900,000, $892,000 in funds requested. And we're planning on submitting 1 or 2 funding grants for restoring habitat for western monarch butterfly, which is not covered by our plan, but there's a petition now to list the monarch. The eastern population's been doing well. The western population has literally crashed from 1 million adults to last survey 28,000. So they're in rough shape. So in all our restoration projects, we're adding the milkweed to, like we have it out at Grant Park, we'll be doing it at Pajaro, and some of the nectar plants that they need. And if it ends up being listed and we amend the plan, we'll add it as a covered species. I think even if it doesn't get listed, we probably will list it, add it as a covered species, given the precarious state that it has been in. So just a quick restoration update. The project that Jerry talked about on Pacheco Creek, expected to start in spring of construction in 2021. Coyote Ridge Ponds, which also Jerry's managing, construction is underway, will be completed on October 15th. I didn't mention on here that we're working with the city of San Jose and Valley Water and trying to collaborate on some Coyote Creek projects. There's projects there to deal with some of the flood concerns the 2 agencies, the city and the Valley Water have. There might be an opportunity for us to help out with funding to do some ecological restoration in conjunction with the veg management and other stuff. And Valley Water is the lead on the Bosa Road project, and when completed, will result in 1,700 feet of stream restoration credit for the Habitat Agency. And so that's a good thing. And on the back, just update you a little bit on some land acquisition. So Tilton Ranch, I mentioned. Clara, I had a great meeting with Don Rocha, who's on the board here, and also Parks Director, about so Calero Park would be enrolled in our reserve system for 2 purposes. One is to help with our conservation objectives of the plan. We have to acquire land for recovery and conservation, and also for mitigation. So county doesn't pay land cover fees for county projects, and in return they're going to enroll some of their parklands. And this property is the one that's first on the docket, and we're really close, hopefully, to getting this completed. We've worked through a lot of the thorny issues, and recently had a conversation with the county attorney about how we track credits for the county on this, and I think we're there, and just putting together an interim management plan, and then I think we're good to go to take it to the county board for approval, and then bring it back here for approval of this board. There's 6 additional properties that we're talking to landowners about at various stage in acquisition process. A couple of them we're doing appraisals on. One I'm hoping to sign a purchase and sale agreement on at the end of the month. And we're in negotiations with a couple ranchers about putting conservation easements over their portions of their property in the Pacheco Pass area. So that's the end of my report. Any questions?
Thank you, Edmund. No, we do have a speaker, Doug Muirhead, like to come up and speak for a couple of minutes regarding this item. And I just want to say, especially with the UTC property, when we get our annual report and it shows where we are on our goals of frogs and lizards and birds and rocks and such.
Oh my.
What's that?
Oh my.
Oh my, exactly. That's going to be a real game changer. As far as what is on that property and the amount of what's on that property. And I look forward to seeing where we are maxed out, because one concern I've had from day one is we were acquiring, and then didn't have the ongoing funding to manage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think at some point when we've, not that you don't always want to continue to conserve and continue to preserve and do all the good things, but we also have to be responsible landowners and property owners. And at a certain point, we may have reached all of the promises that we've made on the various species. Even if we do add butterflies onto the list. I fancy that job as far as counting butterflies, but at a certain point, I would love to hear back from you where we are in the projected funding, future funding we have to make sure we can manage responsibly what we've taken ownership of.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And we've had some discussions internally about if we're successfully acquire all these properties, get Clara enrolled, it's a paradigm shift for us. If you all remember, we tried to acquire Rancho El Toro, which was 12,500 acres. And that was going to be a major paradigm shift, because we were going to have to get into that thinking that now we're land managers. We've got to get a little bit away from acquiring.
Yeah, we went through this with parks, where we had monies designated for acquisition, but not so much management, maintenance, improvements. You know, you buy a piece of property, you want to put nice trails on it. And so we got to a little point and had to do some adjusting on percentages to be able to do that. So I look forward to whatever end of year report, end of fiscal year calendar, whenever we get that report.
Sure.
That we're given. And it may be a discussion that says, okay, we only need to find some land that has this. Let's make sure we can preserve what we've got. Sorry, Doug, thank you. Please go ahead.
Sorry, just one more thing.
Yeah, he's got a couple of minutes.
Supervisor Samarian is having a hard time hearing us, so if we could please just remember to speak a little more closely to the mic. Thank you.
Supervisor, can you hear us now?
Thank you, colleague. I can hear you now, and I don't want to miss a word. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, the board members and staff. For the record, my name is Doug Muirhead of Morgan Hill. I was at the High Speed Rail Board meeting on Tuesday. The executive officer spoke to them. Should they ask him to share what he said and how he felt about the meeting?
Thank you.
Gladly, sure. So strictly from an environmental impact standpoint, the High-Speed Rail Authority has been working very closely with us to deal with some thorny issues related with wildlife connectivity and how their project would impact our plan area and how they propose to mitigate for those impacts. Because the worst thing that could happen if they came in and bought a critical property to mitigate for their impacts, a property that is projected to be enrolled in our reserve system. And I know this is based on voluntary landowner willingness to sell, but if they buy it for mitigation, it can never be used for mitigation by anybody else. If a private landowner buys a property, we still have 45 years to try to buy it. But if high-speed rail buys it, it's off the table forever. So they've agreed to collaborate with us on any acquisitions that they may do in this county. And also, we were happy with some of the engagement we had with them and how they would deal with some of the endangered species impacts. I also told them, given the concerns of the city of Morgan Hill and the city of San Jose, that I'm hoping they can work through some of the problems with at-grade crossing, which Mayor Liccardo brought out, Christina Turner from the city manager's office, and a lot of the citizens, primarily from the city of San Jose and the Willow Glen Gardner neighborhood, expressing some concern about the at-grade crossings. And that's what I said. I only had 2 minutes, so I tried to get it done quicker.
Thank you. Any other questions for our Executive Director, Renee?
Thank you, and yeah, I heard about the 2 minutes. Yeah. With regards to the Tilton Ranch, so there's the 20 more acres came up for sale, according to news articles here in the area. And maybe I shouldn't ask, but it's because I don't want to alert anyone. But is that something we're pursuing?
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, we're the lead on trying to acquire it. So, and we're in negotiations, but I can, yeah. So far, so good. I can tell you that. Yep.
Thank you. That's good to know. And just for my clarification, what does the term PCA mean, and what the and PCA
Yes, sorry.
say?
I should have spelled that out. It's the Priority Conservation Area. It's a Coastal Conservancy ABAG definition, and they have grant programs and that are for restoration and for land acquisition that they provide funding. So
and PSA is Purchase Servicing Agreement?
Oh, PSA, yeah, sorry, Purchase and Sale Agreement. Yep. I'm learning all this stuff too.
Yeah, I apologize for my rookie questions, but I wanted to make sure I understand.
No, they were all rookie things for me not that long ago.
All right, thank you.
And each organization has its own. I have a teleconference tonight with PSA, which is another acronym for another name.
Yeah,
so
I'll spell those out.
There's only so many letters in the alphabet.
Exactly, exactly.
Exactly. All right, with that, we'll consider that report received. We have one final item, which is an action item for the Joint Governing and Implementation Board, and that is item number 1 on our agenda, approval of the minutes from the March 21st meeting. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any comments? Where's Doug? Any comments on the minutes? None. Speaker, Supervisor submitting, anybody phoning in? Any questions or comments regarding the minutes?
No.
We'll take that as a no. Angie, you want a roll call vote on this item, correct?
Yes, please.
Okay, go right ahead.
Cheras Wasserman.
Aye.
Lazat. Here. Board members Esparza.
Here.
Rocha.
Aye.
Kalman.
Aye.
Tucker.
Aye.
Spring.
Aye.
Semidian.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. We had a report from the Chair Supervisor Chair Lazat, but she is gone. I don't have any report to give. We'll now move on to a very brief agenda for governing board items. We have items 5, 6, and 7 on our consent calendar. Doug, do you wish to speak to any of those items? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion from governing board members.
So moved.
Move to approve. Second.
Move to approve. Second by Maya. Did you get that, Angie?
Yes,
We did.
thank you.
Any further discussion on any of items 5, 6, and 7? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Angie, is that all right?
Aye.
Do you need a roll call?
Yes.
Angie, go ahead, roll call.
Chair Wasserman.
Yes.
Board members Esparza.
Aye.
Tucker.
Aye.
Spring.
Aye.
Semidian.
Aye.
Thank you. 5, 6, and 7 pass unanimously. Future governing board initiated agenda items. Anybody wish to recommend anything for future agenda items?
I don't
Yes.
have anything to recommend. I just wanted to know that as you go forward with the monarch butterfly, to just keep us updated. And as you may or may not know, Gilroy Gardens has a monarch habitat.
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, you need
Yeah.
to go in there. It's beautiful.
Okay.
And they're all over the place.
You can
Oh,
practice.
great.
You can practice counting there.
Yes. Yeah.
All the whatever feeding
Yeah.
flowers or whatever they're
And we-
called are all within that area. And it's an enclosed environment.
Oh, cool. And we did see 2 of them on the UTC property, by the way. So
You saw 2 of them?
2 of them, yeah.
Oh, nice.
There you go, super. Supervisor Simitian, do you have any suggestions for future governing board initiated items?
Thank you. No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We will then adjourn this meeting, and Angie, Governing Board, January 16th, 2020, wow, and Implementation Board, November 21st, 2019. Thank you. The meetings are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So wait, you didn't.